What's up everyone? I'm not afraid of no ghost. It's John from ARTV. It's time for a review of the Ghostbusters soundtrack. The movie just came out in theaters. Obviously a soundtrack companion piece following along with that. Following a mega superstar stacked, super loaded lineup full of your favorite musicians. Maybe. I don't know if they're your favorites or not, but there's a lot of people on here. Fall Out Boy, Walk the Moon, A$AP Ferg, Wolf Alice, Mark Ronson, so many others. There's a lot of people on this soundtrack. And do all the songs actually have something to do with the Ghostbusters film? Absolutely not. In fact, I'm wondering how they actually got it by on some of these tracks. Zayn was sneaky on one of them. The whole song seems to be about a relationship, but he threw the word ghost in there, and I say, kudos Zayn, you saved the day. So Ghostbusters is obviously originally a 1984 film, kind of a supernatural horror comedy, not so much horror really at all, mostly a lot of comedic and kind of maybe some thriller elements. It was one of my favorite films from my childhood years. Obviously the original Ray Parker Jr. Ghostbusters theme was huge. #1 Billboard Hot 100 hit, #2 in the UK, just a worldwide smash, still popular to this day. I've always loved that song. But, of course, we've got some new takes on it, and with Hollywood, we're always rebooting, resequeling, whatever it is, retooling, playing around to make more money, basically. Sony's clearly here to murder your childhood, and as a result, we get a lot of new artists doing new takes on the original Ghostbusters theme. And whenever Fall Out Boy dropped their version of it with Missy Elliott, Ghostbusters, I'm Not Afraid, you would have thought Fall Out Boy would have broken into every Ghostbusters fan that's 30 plus years old, killed their entire family, and walked away as they lather the blood on themselves. That's the reaction it got online. And guys, Jesus Christ, it's not that bad. The more I listen to it, the catchier it is. It's kind of in one ear, out the other, but if you're listening to the movie or watching the soundtrack credits, is it really that awful? The answer is no. Missy Elliott's verse is pretty fucking terrible though. I was cautiously anxious for this soundtrack because there were a lot of names that I like on here, like Walk the Moon. I like Fall Out Boy. I like A$AP Ferg. There's some names on the soundtrack that definitely drew me in. But the biggest heavy hitter for me is one of my favorite bands, and actually the last band that I gave a perfect 5 out of 5 score for, at least to a new album in 2015. My Love Is Cool was the album by a British band called Wolf Alice. They have a song on this soundtrack called Ghoster, and you best believe I was knocking down doors to get my hands on this track. I went straight to this song. This was the one that I had to play first. I just had to know how it sounded because I've loved so many of their EPs, obviously their album as well, dying to get my hands on their box set that's coming out, and I'm putting in those headphones, listening to the first little bit of the song, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe we're getting to something here. It's a little repetitive on the bass and guitar, but you know, we're grooving out, and then that chorus hits, and it's just... It's not good. This song doesn't sound good. Ellie Rossell does not sound good on this track, and it's just a clunky chorus that just hit me in a very weird way. In fact, it's sitting worse with me with repeated listens. Most songs tend to grow on me. This one kind of digressed and took a nosedive off a cliff. I'm so disappointed because I thought Wolf Alice were gonna be the highlight of this album, and obviously I still have so much love for them. That doesn't change it at all. But unfortunately, this is actually one of the low moments on the soundtrack, and that's kind of weird considering some of these tracks are just passable at best to me. There's some huge superstars that I haven't even mentioned that appear on this record, like the a cappella group Pentatonics, doing a really cool take on the original Ghostbusters theme. It's nothing outstanding, it's what you would expect if you've listened to Pentatonics before. Zayn, formerly of One Direction, comes in with that track that I mentioned earlier called Who. Basically, it's a little bit repetitive. He's saying who you're gonna call, and I keep saying Ghostbusters. I shout it out loud every time he says it, but he just keeps asking who I'm gonna call. And I'm like, Zayn, if you're not gonna listen, bro, I'm just gonna walk away. To be fair and put the joking aside for a second, I actually do like this Zayn track. There's a few elements that kind of distract me though. I feel like he sounds a lot like Chris Brown from his hit song With You, which is kind of strange. It's a weird vibe to get from a song on a Ghostbusters soundtrack. But once again, like I mentioned earlier, this track really isn't about Ghost at all. It actually seems like mainly about a relationship and him saying, you know, who are you gonna call in your time of need? Basically kind of playing off of that who you gonna call Ghostbusters thing. And I don't know, it's okay in a sense. I'm not gonna say that it's an outstanding track, but in terms of what this soundtrack has to offer, I would say that this is one of the better songs. We get a lot of other big names kind of shaken about and littered everywhere throughout this record. Elle King, Walk the Moon, Mark Ronson, G-Eazy, and of course the one everyone seems to have been dying for me to talk about, the new 5 Seconds of Summer track. Most of these songs are actually pretty decent. The Mark Ronson one, Get Ghost, is a little bit weird. I don't like really the super slick style that once again plays off of the Ghostbusters theme. There's so many songs here that are just based around that or else new takes on it. It's just like, how many times am I gonna have to sit through the Ghostbusters soundtrack and hear a reworked version of the Ray Parker Jr. song? But this song has its moments, I suppose. It's just the weirdest combination that you would think of. A$AP Ferg, Mark Ronson on production, and then Passion Pit, but it somehow doesn't sound like a total mess. It's just a little bit flat in areas. Everyone's favorites, G-Eazy and Jeremiah, come on to talk about sex in a Ghostbusters film and manage to relate everything to some sort of like innuendo, or else basically play out the whole song as like, hey, come over or let me come over and take care of you, because nothing screams fuck me like a paranormal entity in your home. G-Eazy, G, no thanks. There's 2 more original songs that I want to talk about from this film before we discuss a couple of others that are scattered throughout this soundtrack, a couple of classics, and a new song that I was turned on to. I first want to mention the metal song that appears near the end of this record. It's not super hard, it's just kind of like metal meets punk in a way, and it's from a band apparently from Canada that I had never even heard of. In fact, I'm having to look at their name once again here. Beasts of Mayhem on Want Some More, a fast little 2-minute song that really caught my ear near the end of this record. I love the guitars, just the fast-paced ferocity and the tenacity that bleeds through on this track really matches the mood of, I feel like, more so the original Ghostbusters. Even though I haven't seen the new one, it just doesn't seem like it's quite in line with the image that they're trying to sell here, unlike some of these tracks, but still, it's a nice fit right at the end of things before the original Ghostbusters song that's included by Ray Parker Jr. Nice little track, and I have to say, I'd like to hear more from this band. The Australian pop rock band 5 Seconds of Summer have a brand new song called Girls Talk Boys on the soundtrack, and I was surprised at how spry this track is. Very 80s leaning. A lot of these songs on the soundtrack are. Obviously the 80s are back in a big way, especially in the music scene. Ghostbusters originally being from the 80s itself, it totally makes sense. We saw that with Walk the Moon's amazing cover, probably one of my favorite songs here. Didn't even really discuss it, but what more really needs to be said? Walk the Moon putting their signature touch with the squealing synths and some of the roaring guitars, and obviously Nick Petrica's amazing vocals on this track. Spectacular, truly a highlight on this soundtrack. But 5 Seconds of Summer are holding their own and actually make one of my favorite songs on this soundtrack. Even though lyrically it doesn't really relate that much to the message of the film and what's going on there, it's still a pretty cool track. I like the kind of falsetto range that they hit, and they kind of team up on some of the harmonies here, and the way that they add in the pianos. The production choices were really interesting, and I would love to see 5 Seconds of Summer explore this more in the future. They sound great here. I really don't think that there's that much I need to say about tracks like Party Up in Here by DMX, or even Rhythm of the Night that appear on this soundtrack. They've been around for a long time. They're classic tunes, and I can see why they included them in the soundtrack. The song, however, that I do want to pinpoint that's actually not an original song for the soundtrack, but was included instead, makes sense. The Ghostbusters obviously an all-female cast this time around. American Woman by a duo that I had never heard of before, but they are so soulful and have so much integrity that goes along with their music. They really sold me and actually got me to check out more of their music. The name of the band is Muddy Magnolias, and their voices sound fantastic. In fact, there's so much tension behind this track. It really just unleashes, especially once the guitars really start to cascade down upon the eardrum. Sounds fantastic. I highly recommend checking out this duo. There's a lot of power behind this little track, and I love that they included it in the soundtrack. It fits perfectly. It's essentially a game of Battleship, guys. You put the album on shuffle, some of them are hits, some of them just kind of sink to the bottom. And I think that it's kind of a muddled, messy soundtrack, but there definitely are some highlights and a good handful of songs that I'm pretty grateful for being turned onto. I'm gonna say a 3 for the new Ghostbusters soundtrack. If you guys have heard it or else heard some of the songs from it, let me know your thoughts on them in the comments section down below. And if you saw the movie, don't spoil it for me because I will probably see it at some point. I don't know if I'm ready to see it yet. Maybe I'll wait till it comes out on Blu-ray. Thanks for watching and liking this video. subscribing to the channel because friends don't let friends go unsubscribed, and of course, letting me know what other albums you'd like to see me tackle. If you're curious, you can support me on Patreon, help the videos and the reviews keep coming on this channel, and of course my side channel Beyond ARTV as well. It's the top link in the description down below if you'd like to donate. You can check out the last review that I did, or another video that you might like, by clicking those little annotations there. All of my social media is linked in the video description, and other than that, I will see you very soon right here on ARTV.